A billionaire disguised himself as a homeless man. Only one person helped. The crumpled dollar bill felt like a lead weight in his outstretched hand, heavier than any gold ingot, more oppressive than any market crash he had ever navigated. Elias Thorne, a man whose net worth could fund small nations, whose every whim was meticulously catered to. A man who commanded boardrooms and moved global markets with a single decisive word, had just been spat on. Not with the crude physical act of saliva, but with something far more insidious, with indifference, with contempt, with the chilling absolute certainty of his own utter invisibility. He adjusted the tattered beanie over his matted, greasy hair, the rough, synthetic fabric scratching mercilessly against his scalp, a constant, irritating reminder of his chosen squalor. The pervasive stench of stale sweat, unwashed clothes, and the indefinable grime of the city was a suffocating shroud, a constant, inescapable reminder of the elaborate, agonizing deception he was living. This was day 3. Day 3 of being utterly, profoundly ignored. Day 3 of being a non-person. And the experiment, meticulously designed to prove a profound point about the inherent goodness of human nature, was instead shattering his own deeply held beliefs, piece by agonizing piece. For years, Elias Thorne had existed within a gilded cage of unimaginable privilege. His days were a dizzying, luxurious blur of private jets soaring above the clouds, penthouse suites offering panoramic views of glittering cityscapes, and exclusive charity galas, where millions were pledged with a casual flick of a diamond-encrusted pen. He was a titan of industry, a visionary whose name was synonymous with audacious success, groundbreaking innovation, and to his detractors, a ruthless, unyielding efficiency. Yet, beneath the polished veneer of his impeccably tailored suits and the confident gleam in his eyes, a gnawing, persistent question had begun to fester. In a world seemingly obsessed with accumulating wealth and chasing fleeting status, did genuine human connection still exist? Could true, unadulterated compassion survive the relentless, all-consuming pursuit of profit? His board members, his sycophantic inner circle, they scoffed at his philosophical musings. Humanity is a commodity, Elias, his cynical CFO, Marcus Vance, had once quipped during a particularly brutal quarterly review. It's bought and sold like everything else. Sentiment is a weakness in the market and in life. Elias, however, refused to believe it. He clung to a stubborn, almost naive belief in an inherent goodness, a spark of empathy that transcended social strata, a fundamental decency that lay buried beneath the layers of societal artifice. So, driven by this conviction, and perhaps a desperate need to prove Marcus wrong, he devised a radical, audacious, and profoundly dangerous experiment. He would disappear. He would shed his identity, his vast fortune, his very essence, and become nothing. He would become a homeless man. The transformation was meticulous, agonizing in its detail, a deliberate stripping away of everything that defined him. His usually sharp, bespoke suits, custom-made in London and Milan, were replaced by layers of stained, ill-fitting clothes, smelling faintly of mildew and despair, sourced from the grimmiest charity bins he could find. His perfectly coiffed, Silver Street hair, usually attended to by the city's most exclusive stylists, was left unwashed for days, then weeks, until it hung in lank, greasy strands, clinging unpleasantly to his neck. A week's growth of designer stubble became a tangled, itchy, unkempt mess of a beard, a coarse mask that obscured his once recognizable features. He rubbed dirt meticulously into his hands, beneath his fingernails, smudged charcoal under his eyes to mimic the hollowed, shadowed look of chronic sleep deprivation, and painstakingly practiced a shuffling, defeated gait that spoke volumes of exhaustion, hopelessness, and the crushing weight of endless days on the street. He even learned to suppress the confident, piercing glint in his eyes, replacing it with a vacant, unfocused stare that mirrored the profound despair he had seen in the eyes of countless others on the street. His custom-made wallet, his cutting-edge smartphone, his entire digital and physical identity, all locked away in a secure, climate-controlled vault, guarded by biometric scanners and armed security. He carried only a few crumpled dollars, a tattered, moth-eaten blanket that offered little warmth, and a profound, unsettling sense of unease, a constant hum of vulnerability that vibrated beneath his skin. He was no longer Elias Thorne, the billionaire. He was just a man with nothing, a man who was utterly, completely, and terrifyingly alone. The first day was a shock to his system, a brutal, relentless assault on every one of his pampered senses. The concrete beneath his worn-out, threadbare sneakers was relentlessly hard, unforgiving, radiating a chilling dampness that seeped into his bones. The air, usually filtered, purified, and perfectly conditioned in his hermetically sealed world, was now a noxious symphony of exhaust fumes, stale garbage, human waste, and the metallic tang of impending rain. The constant, relentless roar of traffic, the cacophony of 1,000 hurried footsteps pounding the pavement, the shrill blare of horns, the distant wail of sirens. It was a relentless assault on his ears, a chaotic, unending din that offered no respite. He sat on a cold, unforgiving bench near a bustling, upscale coffee shop, the aroma of freshly brewed artisanal coffee a cruel, tantalizing torment. His sign, crudely scrawled on a piece of scavenged cardboard with a broken crayon, read simply, "Hungry. Anything helps." He watched. He waited. He became a silent, motionless observer of the world that had once been his. The faces that passed him were a blur of indifference, a kaleidoscope of averted gazes. Businessmen in crisp, expensive suits strode past, their briefcases swinging like impenetrable shields, their eyes fixed firmly on some distant, unseen horizon. Students, headphones clamped over their ears, lost in their own worlds of music and podcasts, navigated around him as if he were merely an inconvenient obstacle, a crack in the pavement to be avoided. Mothers with strollers, their faces etched with concern for their precious cargo, pulled their children closer, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and pity, quickly hurrying past. He was a ghost in plain sight, a shadow that no one dared to acknowledge, a problem to be circumvented, a stain on the pristine urban landscape. Every averted glance, every hurried step away, every dismissive gesture was a tiny insidious cut, a fresh wound to his already raw spirit. He felt a profound, aching loneliness he had never known, a chilling, absolute isolation that no amount of money, no amount of power could ever buy or alleviate. This wasn't just about being ignored. It was about being unseen. It was about being utterly, completely erased from the collective consciousness of humanity. The weight of his non-existence was crushing. Day 2 brought a new, deeper level of despair, a chilling realization of the true depths of his chosen predicament. The hunger was no longer a dull ache. It was a gnawing, insistent pain in his stomach, a constant, burning companion that consumed his thoughts. The cold seeped relentlessly into his bones, even in the deceptive warmth of the summer sun. A persistent, internal chill that spoke of profound vulnerability, of a body slowly shutting down. He tried different spots, strategizing like a general deploying troops. Outside a bustling grocery store, near a busy subway entrance, by a seemingly tranquil city park. The results were universally, depressingly the same. A few tossed coins dropped quickly into his lap, as if his touch might contaminate them, their metallic clink a hollow mockery of true generosity. A muttered, contemptuous "get a job" from a passing teenager, his face contorted in disgust. A stern security guard, his face impassive, his voice devoid of emotion, telling him to move along, as if he were a piece of litter. He watched, horrified, as a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s, her face radiating a superficial concern for her diet, dropped a half-eaten, perfectly good sandwich into a nearby trash can, then walked past him without a single glance, her eyes fixed on her phone. He felt a surge of bitterness, a sharp, unfamiliar emotion that tasted like ash in his mouth. Was this what it was truly like? To be so utterly worthless, so profoundly beneath consideration, that even leftover food, destined for the garbage, was preferable to a human connection, a moment of shared humanity. The experiment was slowly, painfully becoming less about proving the existence of humanity, and more about simply enduring its crushing absence. He was starting to question everything he believed, every optimistic assumption he had ever held about the inherent goodness of people. Was his cynical CFO Marcus right? Was compassion truly dead, suffocated by the relentless march of modern life? The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. By the morning of day 3, Elias was beyond exhausted, both physically and emotionally. His body ached from sleeping on hard, unforgiving ground, every muscle screaming in protest. His throat was raw and parched from the dry, polluted air, the constant rasp of coughs echoing in his chest. His spirit, once indomitable, once capable of weathering any storm in the financial world, felt brittle, chipped away, reduced to a fragile shard by the relentless, dehumanizing tide of indifference. He found himself near a small independent bookstore, its quaint facade a stark contrast to the surrounding concrete jungle. It was the kind of bookstore he used to frequent in his other life, a sanctuary of knowledge and quiet contemplation. The comforting, nostalgic smell of old paper, leather-bound books, and freshly brewed coffee wafted out from its open door. A cruel, tantalizing reminder of the warmth, comfort, and intellectual stimulation he had so cavalierly abandoned. He sat slumped against a grimy brick wall, its cold, rough surface digging into his back, his crude sign resting limply beside him, its message now feeling utterly futile. The city, he realized, was not just a place. It was a roaring, indifferent beast, devouring its own, and he was just another forgotten morsel, a discarded piece of refuse in its vast, churning maw. He watched as countless people hurried by, their faces etched with their own concerns, their own pressing deadlines, their own small, self-contained dramas. They moved with a purpose he no longer possessed, their lives a vibrant, moving tapestry from which he was utterly excluded. He was invisible, utterly, completely, and irrevocably invisible. He closed his eyes, a wave of profound disillusionment washing over him, a crushing despair that threatened to consume him entirely. He had hoped, truly hoped, with a fervent, almost desperate intensity, to find a glimmer, a single solitary spark of the kindness he believed existed within the human heart. Instead, he had found a vast, echoing emptiness, a chilling void where he had expected warmth. He was about to concede defeat, to reach for the emergency burner phone he had hidden in his boot, to call his bewildered assistant, to end this agonizing, soul-crushing charade, when a shadow fell over him. It was not the fleeting shadow of a passing pedestrian, nor the harsh, fleeting shadow of a distant building. This shadow was different. It lingered. It was warm. It was human. He opened his eyes, bracing himself, his body tensing, for another averted gaze, another dismissive wave, another sign of his non-existence. But this shadow was different. It wasn't fleeting. It lingered. It was cast by a person who had stopped. A woman stood before him. She wasn't dressed in designer clothes, nor did she carry a luxury handbag that screamed wealth. Her coat, though clean, was visibly worn at the cuffs, a testament to countless washes and long use, and her sensible, well-worn shoes looked like they had seen many miles, many long shifts. Her hair, pulled back in a simple, practical ponytail, was a soft, unassuming brown, and her face, though tired, held a quiet, enduring strength, a resilience that spoke of a life lived with purpose. There were faint lines around her eyes, etched by time and experience, but they weren't lines of bitterness or cynicism. They were lines of gentle concern, of quiet empathy, of a life lived with an open heart. She looked to be in her late 40s, perhaps early 50s, the kind of person who blended seamlessly into the background of the city, yet now stood out like a beacon. Her name, he would soon learn, was Clara. She didn't avert her gaze. She didn't flinch. She met his eyes directly, without hesitation, without a hint of fear or disgust. Her eyes, a warm, deep hazel, held a surprising depth of compassion, a quiet understanding that seemed to penetrate the layers of grime and despair he had cultivated. For a long moment, she simply stood there, observing him, not with pity, which he had braced himself for, but with a quiet, profound understanding, a recognition of his humanity. Elias, who had spent the last 3 days being either ignored or gawked at like a specimen, found himself unnerved by her steady, unwavering gaze. It was as if she saw him, Elias the man, not just the homeless disguise. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice soft, a little raspy, as if from long hours of talking or singing, but clear, distinct, and utterly genuine. It wasn't a question asked out of obligation, a polite formality to be quickly dismissed, but out of genuine, heartfelt concern, a true inquiry into his well-being. Elias, caught utterly off guard, his carefully constructed facade momentarily crumbling, merely grunted, a sound that felt foreign and rough in his own throat, a guttural noise he barely recognized as his own. He hadn't spoken in days, beyond a mumbled thank you for the occasional coin, his voice box feeling rusty and unused. Clara knelt down, slowly, carefully, her joints creaking slightly with the effort, a small testament to her own physical labors. She wasn't afraid to be close to him, to the smell, to the grime, to the perceived danger. Her proximity was a profound act of acceptance. "You look cold," she said, her voice still gentle, her eyes scanning his shivering frame. "And hungry." She reached into a worn canvas bag slung over her shoulder, its fabric faded but clean. Elias watched, his heart pounding with a strange, unfamiliar mixture of apprehension and a fragile flicker of hope he hadn't realized he still possessed. Was she going to offer him a stale sandwich, perhaps a half-eaten piece of fruit, a cup of cold leftover coffee? He had prepared himself for charity, for the familiar sting of pity, for the quick, transactional exchange. Instead, she pulled out a gleaming silver thermos and a small, neatly wrapped package tied with a simple string. "I just finished my shift at the bakery," she explained, a faint, comforting, flowery scent clinging to her clothes, a subtle aroma of warmth and sweetness. "I always make an extra something for myself to take home. Today it's a warm apple turnover, fresh from the oven, still warm." She unwrapped it slowly, carefully, and the sweet, comforting aroma of baked apples, warm cinnamon, and flaky pastry filled the air, a stark, almost painful contrast to the city's usual stench of exhaust and garbage. "And hot tea. It's chamomile. It'll warm you up inside and out." She didn't just hand it to him, dropping it quickly as if to avoid contact. She offered it gently with both hands, as if offering a precious gift to a cherished friend. Elias hesitated, his hand still outstretched, but now trembling uncontrollably. He hadn't eaten anything warm in days, perhaps weeks. The thought of the apple turnover, the hot tea, the simple, profound comfort they represented, was almost overwhelming, a tidal wave of sensation. He took them, his fingers brushing hers. Her touch was brief, but it was firm, human, utterly devoid of repulsion. Not recoiling, not dismissive, just a simple, honest connection. "Thank you," he managed, his voice cracking, the words feeling alien and rough on his tongue, unused to expressing such raw gratitude. "You're welcome," she replied, her eyes crinkling at the corners in a genuine, tired smile. She didn't move to leave, to hurry away from the uncomfortable interaction. She sat down beside him, slowly, deliberately, on the cold, grimy pavement, her clean coat brushing lightly against his tattered, foul-smelling clothes. She wasn't just offering food, she was offering presence, companionship, a moment of shared humanity in a world that had denied him both. "My name is Clara," she said, extending a hand, not for a handshake, but as an open gesture of connection. Elias, momentarily forgetting his disguise, almost instinctively reached out to shake it with his usual firm, confident grip, the grip of a man who closed multi-million-dollar deals. He stopped himself just in time, instead offering a hesitant, almost imperceptible nod. "Elias," he mumbled, using the first name he had chosen for his persona, a name that felt both alien and strangely fitting in this new, harsh reality. They sat in silence for a few moments, the only sounds the distant city hum and the soft rustle of Elias devouring the apple turnover. The warmth spread through him, a comforting, almost miraculous heat that reached beyond his stomach, thawing something deep within his chest, a frozen core of despair. The tea was sweet, fragrant, infused with the calming scent of chamomile, a luxury he hadn't realized he missed so desperately. A taste of comfort from a forgotten life. He felt a fragile sense of peace settle over him, a fleeting moment of respite from the relentless grind. "It's hard out here, isn't it?" Clara said, her voice low, almost a whisper, breaking the comfortable silence. She wasn't asking for a story, for a sob story, for an explanation. She was simply acknowledging a shared reality, a profound truth. Elias nodded, unable to articulate the profound truth of her statement, the sheer, brutal weight of it. He had known hardship in his life, yes, the cutthroat battles of the corporate world, the stress of high-stakes negotiations, but never this kind. Never the hardship of invisibility, of utter destitution, of being stripped bare of every comfort and dignity. "I know," she continued, her gaze fixed on the bustling street, watching the indifferent river of humanity flow past. "My brother, he fell on hard times a few years back, lost everything. His job, his apartment, his hope. He was out here for a while, on these very streets. It changes you. It breaks you in ways you never thought possible." She paused, a shadow of pain passing over her face, then turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet, profound empathy, a knowing sadness. "But it doesn't change who you are inside. Not really. Not the core of you." Elias looked at her, truly looked at her, seeing beyond the worn coat and tired eyes. She wasn't asking him for anything. She wasn't judging him, wasn't offering platitudes or empty sympathy. She was simply seeing him, a human being, a fellow traveler on the difficult journey of life. It was a profound, almost spiritual experience for him, a moment of grace. He had spent days being treated like dirt, like a ghost, like a problem to be avoided, a blight on the urban landscape. And here was Clara, a stranger, treating him like a person worthy of a warm apple turnover, and a few moments of shared silence, a moment of genuine connection. "What do you do?" Elias asked, the words surprising even himself, a rusty creak from his long unused voice. He hadn't intended to speak, to engage, to reveal anything of his persona. But something about her calm, accepting presence compelled him, drew him out of his self-imposed silence. "I bake," she said, a small, tired smile touching her lips, a hint of pride in her voice. "At the Daily Crumb, just down the street. It's not much, but it pays the bills. Most days." Her gaze drifted to a small framed photo tucked into the clear plastic of her worn wallet, visible when she shifted slightly. It was a picture of a young girl, perhaps 10 or 11, with bright, eager eyes and a wide, gap-toothed smile. "And I have a daughter, Lily. She's my world. Everything I do for her." Elias felt a sharp pang, a sudden, unexpected ache in his chest. A single mother, working long hours at a bakery, likely struggling herself, probably living paycheck to paycheck, yet she was sharing her meager extra with a complete stranger on the street, a man she perceived as utterly destitute. The stark contrast between her profound generosity and the vast, chilling indifference he had encountered from the wealthy, the powerful, the seemingly successful, was almost painful. A searing indictment of the world he had come from. "You should get somewhere warm tonight," Clara said, standing up slowly, her knees protesting with a soft groan, a sign of her own physical weariness. "It's supposed to get colder, a real chill coming in. There's a shelter a few blocks east past the old library. It's not perfect, it's crowded and noisy, but it's better than the street, it's safer." She didn't preach, didn't demand, didn't judge. Just offered practical information, a quiet suggestion born of experience and genuine concern. Elias nodded, his throat tight, choked with unspoken gratitude. He wanted to say more, to ask her why. Why her? Why was she the only one? Why did she care? But the words wouldn't come, caught in the lump in his throat. Clara smiled, a genuine warm smile that reached her eyes, illuminating her tired face. "Take care, Elias," she said, her voice soft, a blessing. And then, with a final lingering look of compassion, a look that conveyed more understanding than any words could, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the relentless stream of hurried pedestrians, becoming just another face in the crowd. Elias watched her go, a strange, powerful mix of emotions swirling within him. Profound relief, overwhelming gratitude, and a deep, humbling sense of awe. He clutched the empty thermos and the crumpled wrapper of the apple turnover, treasures more valuable than any of his vast assets. He hadn't found a grand, sweeping solution to homelessness, not yet, but he had found something far more precious, far more fundamental. A single, undeniable spark of humanity, a beacon of light in the vast, indifferent darkness. He knew then the experiment was over. He had found his answer. The truth he sought was not in the grand gestures of philanthropy, but in the quiet, selfless acts of ordinary people. He waited until nightfall, until the relentless roar of the city had softened to a weary hum, until the streets were quieter, almost deserted, before making the call. His assistant, bewildered by the sudden rough, unfamiliar voice on the other end of the line, quickly dispatched a car, a sleek black limousine that seemed utterly out of place in the grimy alley where Elias waited. When Elias Thorne, the billionaire, stepped out of the luxurious vehicle an hour later, clean-shaven, freshly showered, and dressed in a crisp, perfectly tailored suit, he was a different man. Not just outwardly, his physical transformation complete, but profoundly, irrevocably inwardly. The cynicism that had begun to fester, to harden his heart during his days on the street, had been replaced by a quiet, fierce resolve, a burning purpose that would redefine his life. The very next morning, before the city had fully awakened, Elias Thorne walked into the Daily Crumb. The bakery was small, cozy, radiating a comforting warmth. filled with the intoxicating scent of yeast, sugar, and freshly baked bread. Clara was behind the counter, her hands dusted with flour, her tired but kind smile greeting an early customer. She looked up, her eyes widening in recognition, then narrowing in confusion. The man in the sharp suit, impeccably groomed, radiating an aura of power and wealth. He looked familiar. Too familiar. The eyes, those piercing blue eyes. Elias walked directly to her, his gaze steady, unwavering, filled with a purpose that transcended the simple act of buying a pastry. "Clara," he said, his voice no longer rough and cracked, but clear, resonant and commanding, the voice of a man accustomed to leading. Her eyes widened further, a gasp escaping her lips. "Elias," she whispered, her voice laced with disbelief, with a dawning, impossible understanding. What happened to you? You look different." "I found what I was looking for," he replied, a faint, genuine smile touching his lips, a smile that reached his eyes. "And I found you," he explained, not in a grand, dramatic, self-congratulatory reveal, but quietly, humbly, his voice filled with a raw honesty. He recounted his experiment, the brutal days of invisibility, the crushing despair, the profound disillusionment, and then her unexpected, life-altering kindness. Clara listened, her face a mask of shock, then dawning understanding, then a profound, almost tearful realization that brought tears to her own eyes. Her hands, still dusted with flour, trembled slightly. "You were a billionaire?" she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper, the words sounding alien and immense in the small, warm bakery. "I am," he corrected gently, his voice firm but kind. "And I owe you more than you can possibly imagine. You gave me back my faith in humanity." He paused, reaching into his inner jacket pocket, not for a check, not for a simple monetary donation, but for something else, something far more significant. "Clara, you showed me that true compassion isn't about grand gestures when you have everything. It's about a one-apple turnover when you have little. It's about seeing someone when everyone else looks away, when they choose indifference. It's about dignity, not just charity." He pulled out a small, elegantly designed business card. It wasn't for Thorne Industries, his vast corporate empire. It was for a new foundation, one he had established overnight, working tirelessly through the night, driven by a renewed sense of purpose. "I'm starting a new initiative," he explained, his voice filled with passion, a fire that had been rekindled in the depths of his despair. "A national network of community kitchens and shelters, designed not just to feed and house, but to truly empower. To offer dignity, comprehensive job training, mental health support, and a sustainable path back to a life of independence. It will be called the Daily Crumb Foundation, in honor of the place where I found my answer. And I want you to run it, as its chief op—" Clara stared at the card, then at him, her eyes brimming with tears, her mind reeling. "Me? But I'm just a baker. I don't have experience running a foundation, let alone a national one." "No, Clara," Elias said, his voice firm, unwavering, filled with absolute conviction. "You are not just a baker. You are the embodiment of everything this foundation stands for. You have the heart, the compassion, the profound understanding of what it means to be truly vulnerable, an understanding that money alone can't buy or teach. You saw me when no one else did. You offered hope when I had none. That is leadership, Clara. That is true wealth. That is the kind of leadership this—" He offered her a salary that would change her life beyond her wildest dreams, a dedicated team to build, and the vast resources of his empire to make a real lasting difference on a scale she could scarcely imagine. He told her about Lily, her daughter, and how the foundation would ensure she had every opportunity Every advantage, every chance to thrive. He explained that this wasn't charity, but a partnership, a profound mission driven by the fundamental, life-altering lesson she had taught him on a cold, indifferent street corner. Clara, overwhelmed, her face streaked with tears of joy and disbelief, could only nod, a silent affirmation of acceptance. She had given a stranger a worn apple turnover, a simple act of kindness, and in return, she was being given the chance to change the world, to extend that same compassion to countless others. The story of Elias Thorne's audacious experiment and Clara's quiet, profound act of kindness spread like wildfire across the nation, then across the globe. It became a powerful testament to the enduring power of empathy in an increasingly cynical world. Elias, once known as a ruthless businessman, transformed his vast empire, redirecting vast sums towards social initiatives, becoming a true, compassionate philanthropist, a visionary leader in social change. But it was Clara, the humble baker, who became the true face of the Daily Crumb Foundation. Her quiet strength, her unwavering compassion, and her profound understanding of human dignity, inspiring countless others to look closer, to see beyond the surface, to offer a hand. Elias Thorne learned that day that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or properties, in stocks or bonds, but in the moments when one human being truly sees another, when a simple act of kindness cuts through the noise and indifference of the world, creating a ripple effect that can change lives. He had disguised himself as a homeless man to find the truth, a fundamental answer to his deepest questions. And in doing so, he had found something far more profound. A mirror that reflected not the world's flaws, but its enduring, boundless capacity for good, embodied in the quiet, compassionate heart of... And that, he knew, was a fortune beyond measure, a legacy far greater than any empire he could ever build.